The first one should be pretty obvious. I ask you a question. Now, clearly, the easiest way to make students pay attention to their information gaps is to explicitly ask them to focus on that gap with a question. But here's where information gap theory becomes very useful because it tells us that not all questions are the same. Imagine if I had tried to generate curiosity for the principle of motion with this question rather than with a multiple choice question related to the video. Would that have been successful in generating curiosity? In fact, an open-ended question like this one could have actually made you less engaged by reminding you how little you knew about a topic, overwhelming your attention with white background noise. Or imagine if I had tried to generate curiosity for the concept of opportunity cost with this question. Now, in this instance, you may not have cared about the answer because the question will have failed to open any subjective gaps in your knowledge. And this is a rather common mistake since we humans tend to think we know more than we actually do. So some questions are better than others at generating curiosity in students. And which questions are better probably requires its own separate webinar. But information gap theory does provide us with one obvious additional insight into the type of question we want to ask. Choice questions. Notice how the simple strategy of changing the open-ended question about motion to a single choice question solved the problem of too much white noise, a large gap. And a choice question also prevented me from making the error of not opening a very small gap with the opportunity cost question. Now, you may think the only ones with a gap in the opportunity cost question must be the PhD economists or economists in the audience, but here's where the power of information gap theory becomes self-evident. As it turns out, economists are likely the most curious people right now to find out what I think or what other economists think is the correct answer to the question. Believe me, I have given this talk to rooms full of economists, and sometimes the discussion about this question turned out to be quite heated. And why are economists the most curious people? Again, because they have the most information, and the choice question creates a definitional gap in them. As long as the responders, do not know for sure how I, the asker, and other responders will answer the question, there will be a gap. Or it could also be that those economists in the audience today don't really know, have been going about their life thinking they knew what opportunity cost is, and they really don't. Okay, so after creating an effective multiple choice gap with a multiple choice question, I try to increase your attention by eliminating choices and hence further reducing that gap. Now, the questions I used today are very good for this type of strategy because the distractors are particularly effective in that people tend to distribute themselves equally among them. But the most effective way to use multiple choice questions for building curiosity in students is by really having them vote their answer with some kind of polling device or app at the same time that you ask a question, and then using the information they give you about the way they vote to manage the discussion. So a very good thing to do at that point is to start eliminating choices and let them vote again. Now notice that if you use a polling device, the polling device or app has a further advantage of increasing motivation by increasing commitment. This is why you actually got curious even by writing it down somewhere, without the need to offer extra points. So you can get commitment without extra point. The commitment itself is what motivates people to know the answer. So another thing I did is I focused your attention to the information gap by suggesting your previous self already knew the answer to the question. And I did that when I told you that if you have ever seen or taken the flying chair ride, then you must already know the answer to the question. The idea here is that the closer you are to closing the gap, the more curious you will be. This is a reason why the most curious you are about the gender of your child during the pregnancy is when you're at the sonogram room and the technician tells you they already know the gender, but they don't tell you. At that point, your curiosity is so strong because it's so close to you that you may even become violent, right? If they don't tell you what the answer is. And who can be closest to you than your previous self? This is precisely the reason we can't start looking for the title of a song we hear, but we can't quite remember its name. It's in the tip of our tongue. In fact, some people call information gap theory the tip of the tongue effect. So an easy way to make your students curious is simply to tell them, guys, you have answered this question before. Or, guys, you already answered this when you read the chapter. It's a very effective way to actually make them more curious by reminding them that the previous self already knows it. But perhaps the most effective and important strategy I use today is that I refuse to close the information gap I created. And in so doing it, I was able to keep you motivated at every part of the activity. because motivation is the key in the era of online teaching. In fact, this is the essence of my message to you today. I have always believed that we cannot force an unmotivated student to learn anything, but we cannot prevent a motivated one from doing so. But even if you disagree with me about the importance of focusing our teaching in motivation, technological innovation in the education market is giving you no choice but to assume that I'm right. Because technological advances in the last 20 years have dramatically lowered the cost of using machines to provide two of the services we human teachers have provided over many, many years: transfer information and provide timely feedback. In fact, the machine not only provides those two services at a lower cost, but also arguably at a greater quality. The video lecture and the mastery learning or adaptive learning technique are arguably more effective than the chalk and talk lecture and the pencil and paper exam counterparts. This is what technology does. It makes things better and cheaper. And it is finally doing that with education. So it is not clear whether the classroom will disappear, but it is very clear that the individual student desk will probably will, at least for the first years in college. In fact, to all accounts, individualized instruction in the classroom is already way too expensive relative to the alternative for anyone to be using it much longer. Think about it. If that wasn't the case, you will not be considering replacing it altogether, even for a short period of time during this pandemic, with an online approach. But we teachers, I think, should embrace this change, not resist it, because what it means is that now we are liberated from the technological constraints of the blackboard and the individual student chair or desk to focus on the third and most important part of teaching, which is motivation. This is where we human teachers are still better and more cost effective than the machines. But we can only excel at it if we take the time to understand motivation a bit better, in particular to harness the power of internal motivation systems in humans. Today, what I try to do is to make the case for you to consider one of those internal motivators to learn, which is curiosity. In fact, I would argue that current times are redefining the definition of what teaching is away from simply the act of closing information gaps in a classroom full of student desks. So let me be presumptuous and propose one such new definition for teaching in the era of the teaching machine. Teaching is the art of opening information gaps and knowing how to keep them open. Thank you.